Welcome to this flashback series featuring some of my favorite episodes from the archives discussing key ideas and teachings that take us to the heart of who we are, reveal what makes us tick, and lead us to greater freedom and well-being. This week, we're continuing our discussion of the biggest questions that have been puzzling humanity since the dawn of mankind's intelligence. And we're looking at the macrocosmic aspect of it this week. Yep, it's who are we and why are we here? I'm your host, Janine Hunt, natural health therapist for over 30 years, hypnotherapist, lifelong learner, and student of the Ageless Wisdom. Here on the Sort Yourself Out podcast and in my Better Than Happy Zone membership, I teach powerful top-down techniques and practices so that you can master your mind and emotions, free yourself of what's holding you back, expand your consciousness, and nourish your soul. So let's get started. Well, hello there, and thank you so much for joining me today. I've still got my pointy philosopher's hat on as we are continuing our exploration of those questions that most of us have asked ourselves at some point in our lives. Who am I and why am I here? Now, last week in part one, we were looking at this primarily from an individual perspective, discussing what it all means on the individual or microcosmic level. If you missed it, do go check it out, as these two areas complement each other. And I think you'll find it interesting, possibly even listen to it before you carry on with this one. So today we're hitting the macrocosm. We'll be looking at the past evolution of not only humanity, but the planet and the whole dang solar system, as well as looking at our future. What are we here to do? What's the point? What's it all about? Now, last week, we talked about my favorite quotation by Helena Petrovna Blavatsky that led me to discover and study the Ageless Wisdom teachings. The quote, which sparked off a new understanding within me and left me absolutely fascinated and yearning to know more, was this: matter is spirit at its lowest point of manifestation, and spirit is matter at its highest. So last week, we discussed how spirit and matter are two poles on a continuum. Throughout the history of our world, spirit has been descending into matter. Life has been descending into form. Now, this process is taking place on many levels. On a microcosmic level, in the sense of a human being, but also in a macrocosmic level, in the sense of a planet or a solar system. So, you know how, as we talked about last week, you have a body, and that your body has a source of life energy that animates it and that gives it its characteristics, its qualities and capacities. That's your soul, right? Well, so does a solar system. We always focus on the outer aspect of the solar system, but it too is a body that is brought into existence and to life by a spiritual entity. Now, to us, this vast entity would be considered God, but it is known as the solar logos. The solar system is made up of planets that are also the vehicles of expression of lesser spiritual entities. So, according to the Ageless Wisdom, we are currently living in the second reincarnation of the solar logos. Yes, folks, solar systems reincarnate too. And there's a phrase in the Ageless Wisdom that is used in relation to a planetary or solar logos. And remember, they are spiritual, very advanced entities that are giving life to a planet or a solar system, just as our soul gives us life. And that term, that phrase, is that in them we live and move and have our being. Now, just as our bodies are made up of organs and cells and atoms, in other words, that live and move and have their being in us, and that each of those cells and atoms and organs possesses their own relatively little source of vital life energy, so too are we humans considered as atoms within the continuum of spirit and matter that makes up the planet. And so on with the planets that make up the solar system. Now, you may be familiar with all of these ideas, but I can tell you, I was gobsmacked when I first discovered all this stuff. I was hooked and fascinated and thrilled to have found such info that was all-encompassing and that gave me so many answers that I could not find anywhere else. So here on planet Earth, we have the 4 kingdoms of nature. The 4th is the human kingdom. The 3rd is the animal kingdom. The 2nd is the vegetable kingdom. And the 1st is the mineral kingdom. Now, the human kingdom is actually the macrocosm of the lower 3 subkingdoms. And that is because you, my friend, yes, you, have passed through all the stages that comprise the mineral, vegetable, and animal evolution. And so has every other human soul. You don't get to be a human, at least in our Earth evolution, without passing through these evolutionary phases first. In Telepathy in the Etheric Vehicle by Alice Bailey, it says, every living being or manifested life, from the planetary logos down to the tiniest atom, either has been, is, or will be a man. And if you look at the constitution of a human, we see that the human body is made up of the minerals of the earth. And our circulatory and nervous systems are akin to the root systems and ever-decreasing branch structures of the plants, transmitting blood, nutrients, and electrical impulses to all parts of the body. And the animal has these aspects of the mineral and vegetable kingdom, but also sentiency, instincts, and the dawning of an emotional capacity, as can be seen by the devotion of man's best friend, the dog, and the care that we often see of animals towards one another. The domesticated animals, like dogs, cats, elephants, and horses, are among the most highly evolved because of their long interaction with mankind. And humanity has all of these capacities inherent in the animal, plus self-consciousness and intelligence. In Esoteric Psychology, Volume 1, it says, it must be remembered that each kingdom in nature is dependent upon and draws life from the kingdom which precedes it in the time sense during the evolutionary cycle. Each kingdom is a reservoir of power and of vitality to the next kingdom which emerges under the divine plan. Wow. So while Darwin spoke of evolution as being about one animal thing evolving into another animal thing, the ageless wisdom tells us that evolution is not about the evolution of the physical bodies as such, but about the evolution of consciousness. Across eons and eons, spirit has been cycling through the various kingdoms of nature, eventually becoming the human spirits we recognize ourselves as today. There has also been a physical evolution involved as consciousness learned to exist and manage living in a physical body. Because apparently it wasn't very easy. In the early days, we had to learn how to make the heart beat, how to breathe, how to digest, how to stop the tentacles flailing around all over the place. Okay, I'm not really sure about the tentacles, but let's just say that these were not human bodies as we know them today. They were huge, ungainly, blobby things. But these early forms of consciousness were considered the humans of their time. So gradually, these basic functions like breathing and the heart beating and the digestion that we take for granted today were mastered and passed below the threshold of consciousness so that they were taken care of automatically via the central nervous system, and we no longer had to consciously think about them and make them happen. And I mean, thank God for that, right? We got enough on our plates. We thought we were already multitasking, but imagine having to manage all that stuff as well. So humanity is the most evolved kingdom of nature on our planet and has been around the longest as souls in incarnation. Next, today's animal kingdom will eventually become the next wave of humans to take on individual souls and enter the human kingdom. Currently, animals do not have individualized souls like we do. They have group souls, and that accounts for how a species all looks the same and has the same behavior patterns. And also how flocks of birds and schools of fish can perform those mesmerizing and astonishing group movements as they soar and circulate in perfect unity through the air or the water. You've seen those videos, right? They're just amazing. You wonder, how are they doing that? How are they so synchronized? Well, that's their group soul that they're all connected to. Now, I'm going to do things a little differently today, as I want to share with you some excerpts from my collection of books on esoteric philosophy, psychology, and science. So here's an excerpt from a very illuminating book called The Rosicrucian Cosmo-Conception by Max Heindel. Check it out if you want to know how worlds are formed and all the stages of evolution. So here's a bit more about the group spirit of the animal kingdom. It is the spirit of the group which gathers its flocks of birds in the fall and compels them to migrate to the south, neither too early nor too late to escape the winter's chilly blast. That directs their return in the spring, causing them to fly at just the proper altitude, which differs for the different species. The group spirit of the beaver teaches it to build its dam across a stream at exactly the proper angle. It considers the rapidity of the flow and all the circumstances, precisely as a skilled engineer would do, showing that it is as up to date in every particular of the craft as the college-bred, technically educated man. It is the wisdom of the group spirit that directs the building of the hexagon cell of the bee with such geometrical nicety, that teaches the snail to fashion its house in an accurate, beautiful spiral, that teaches the ocean mollusk the art of decorating its iridescent shell. Wisdom, wisdom everywhere, so grand, so great, that one who looks with an observant eye is filled with amazement and reverence. At this point, the thought will naturally occur that if the animal group spirit is so wise, Considering the short period of evolution of the animal compared with that of man, why does not the latter display wisdom to a much greater degree? And why must man be taught to build dams and geometrize? All of which the group spirit does without being taught. The answer to that question has to do with the descent of the universal spirit into matter of ever-increasing density. In the higher worlds, where its vehicles are fewer and finer, it is in closer touch with cosmic wisdom, which shines out in a manner inconceivable in the dense physical world. But as spirit descends, the light of wisdom becomes temporarily more and more dimmed, until in the densest of all the worlds, it is held almost entirely in abeyance. Ooh, neato, eh? And he then goes on to illustrate this descent of spirit into matter by discussing how a master violinist, for example, would be hampered in playing his instrument and creating sublime music if he had to put on a pair of gloves, that he would lose his delicate touch and finesse. And if he put on another thicker pair of gloves, his movement would be totally impaired and he would create discord instead of the former harmony. And then you bung some mittens on top of the gloves, and he would be entirely unable to play. And then he says, so it is with the spirit. Every step down, every descent into coarser matter is to it what the putting on of a pair of gloves would be to the musician. Every step down limits its powers of expression until it has become accustomed to the limitations and has found its focus, in the same way that the eye must find its focus after we enter the house on a bright summer day. The pupil of the eye contracts to its limit in the glare of the sun, and on entering the house all seems dark. But as the pupil expands and admits the light, the man is enabled to see as well in the dimmer light of the house as he did in the sunlight. The purpose of man's evolution here is to enable him to find his focus in the physical world, where at present the light of wisdom seems obscured. But when in time we have found the light, the wisdom of man will shine forth in his actions and far surpass the wisdom expressed by the group spirit of the animal. Okay, so there's one more thing I want to share about the animal kingdom, as it just tickled me. It just amused me. And I'll tell you why after I've read it. All animals have an internal picture consciousness, similar to the dream state in man. When such an animal is confronted by an object, a picture is immediately perceived within, accompanied by a strong impression that the object is inimical or beneficial to its welfare. If the feeling is one of fear, it is associated with a suggestion from the group spirit how to escape the threatened danger. This negative state of consciousness renders it easy for the group spirit to guide the dense bodies of its charges by suggestion, as the animals have no will of their own. Now, this tickled me, and that's not something I say often when reading these kinds of books, as it made me think of all those YouTube videos where some smartass lays a cucumber on the floor next to some poor, unsuspecting cat who's having his din-dins, and then turns around and sees the cucumber and jumps a mile, hissing and howling. And we humans laugh at that, thinking, silly cat, he's afraid of a cucumber. But it occurred to me when I read that last quotation that this is one of the species' internal images that says danger, snake. So we see a cucumber, but the cat has this internal image. He doesn't know a snake from a cucumber at first glance. So it just tickled me to think that maybe that's what's going on with all of those cat cucumber videos. Anyhow, a bit of a digression there. So if we have got the animal kingdom moving up and graduating into the human kingdom, what is next in line for us, the souls presently incarnating as humans? Well, does anyone remember Jesus Christ? Not something I talk about regularly in this podcast, and indeed, in the old atheist days, would have had me cringing and quite possibly running in the other direction. But alas, here I go, headlong into my discomfort zone. And the reason I can go there now is because, once again, the ageless wisdom made sense of things for me in a way that I could accept and get. And, well, let's just say stomach. Now, here's what it has to say about the Christ. The Christ is both human and divine, the first member of the human race to reconcile that duality in himself and to become God/man in manifestation. I'm going to read that one more time. The Christ is both human and divine, the first member of the human race to reconcile that duality in himself, to become God-man in manifestation. And according to the ageless wisdom, the life of Jesus was meant to show humanity what we are to become. He wasn't planning on starting a religion or being worshipped or counted as the scapegoat and redeemer for all of humanity's sins. His life exemplified the various expansions of consciousness, also known as initiations, or a series of at-one-ments that we will all go through eventually in the course of our human evolution. Everyone. And just a quick note about that word at-one-ment that I found illuminating. It is spelled like atonement. But in this case, at-one-ment, it's at-one-ment, atonement. So it's spelled like atonement, and that, I think, is just something to ponder, as that is perhaps a word that has been misinterpreted across the ages. So one thing I loved when I first read all this is that the Christ is not even a person, so to speak. It's more like an office, like a presidency. This is the office of the world teacher. God, I would not want that job. Can you imagine? And the ageless wisdom tells us that apparently others have also taken on this role in the past. So this Christ energy overshadowed Jesus, and through these 5 initiations, known as the birth, baptism, transfiguration, crucifixion, and the resurrection and ascension, his life symbolized the experience of the human soul through the 5 stages of its spiritual journey. Now, organized religion, for the most part, has taken these things literally and distorted them into a theology and dogmas that are more about God being made in man's image than man being made in God's. Now, on one level, this is understandable. The consciousness of humanity is evolving. There are people at every stage of development around today. Some, who we are told, whose intelligence is barely above that of an animal, and others who are highly advanced, with a whole bunch of stages in between, and a type of spirituality that corresponds for each stage. But there comes a time for many when this kind of religion serves as a hindrance rather than as something that inspires and nourishes the human soul in its expansion. The main problem here is the separativeness of religion. If you're in, you're right and you're acceptable, you're saved. And if you're out, well, you're wrong, you're unacceptable, and you will rot in hell, and I'll probably kill you to put you there. Now, interestingly, in the Ageless Wisdom, they say that the only sin is what they call the great heresy of separativeness, because we are all one. Now, speaking about this literal translation of biblical events, Alice Bailey said in the book, From Bethlehem to Calvary, "Our attention has been engrossed by the symbol and by the outer form, whilst the meaning has remained obscured and fails sufficiently to affect our lives. In our myopic study of the letter, we have lost the significance of the word itself. We need to get behind the symbol to that which it embodies, and to shift our attention away from the world of outer forms to that of inner realities." So this is a huge subject. But if you want to know more about these initiations that we were shown through the Christ energy and the life of Jesus, check out these books by Alice Bailey, From Bethlehem to Calvary, and also Initiation, Human and Solar. Because yes, my friend, initiation is not for humans alone. There are planetary and solar initiations taking place as well. And humanity, as the mediator and bridging element between the three lower subkingdoms, that's animal, vegetable, and mineral, and the three higher spiritual kingdoms, plays a role in the initiation the planetary logos is undertaking. In a treatise on white magic, we read, "All grades of matter meet in man, and all the states of consciousness are possible to him. Mankind can work in all directions and lift the subhuman kingdoms into heaven and bring heaven down to earth." So we're getting a glimpse into the divine purpose of mankind there. We are the macrocosm of the three lower kingdoms, having lived through and transcended all those stages of development before. And we are also the custodians of those kingdoms, responsible for their upliftment, stewarding them through their development to higher stages of evolution. Now, last week, we spoke about the integration of the threefold personality and the soul. And we see here again that it is all about integration of levels of consciousness, which constitute expansions of consciousness. The lesser is transcended and absorbed in the higher. All through evolution, the process is transcend and include, transcend and include. In Esoteric Psychology Volume 2, also by Alice Bailey, it elaborates on this, mentioning the 7 rays that condition consciousness, saying, "This 4th ray is preeminently the ray of the 4th creative hierarchy, the human kingdom, and therefore has a peculiar relation to the functions, relationships, and the service of man as an intermediate group, a bridging group upon our planet. The function of this intermediate group is to embody a type of energy which is that of at-one-ment. The relation of the human family to the divine scheme, as it exists, is that of bringing into close rapport the 3 higher kingdoms upon our planet and the 3 lower kingdoms of nature, thus acting as a clearinghouse for divine energy. The service humanity is to render is that of producing unity, harmony, and beauty in nature through blending into one functioning, related unity, the soul in all forms. Wow. And so here is the biggie. What's next for humanity? We've seen where we came from, but where are we going? Well, we are the 4th kingdom in nature, and we are destined for the 5th kingdom, which is known as the kingdom of souls. The 5th kingdom is also known as the spiritual hierarchy and is made up of adepts and masters who have achieved relative perfection and who are the invisible government on the inner planes of the solar system, who are encouraging and directing the evolutionary process. Are you ready for that? It sounds like quite a jump, doesn't it? But regardless, that's where we are headed. Now, earlier we mentioned a divine plan, and it is this that the spiritual hierarchy is helping to bring into existence on Earth and also throughout the solar system, as we will see. Now, the plan is vast, and we are only given a little bit of it to understand. There's no point us trying to understand what's going on in the mind of a solar logos. It's just way too big for a wee human mind. It's like asking your pet rock to run your business for you. Not going to happen, right? But this rather long quotation I'm about to read you from Esoteric Psychology, Volume 2, gives us a glimpse, and a rather wide-ranging one at that, into what is in store for us. So I quote, "The objectives for our purposes can be stated as 4 in number, but each of these is capable of re-expression in a number of ways. They simply indicate the 4 major goals which the workers with the plan have set themselves. 1. The first aim, and the primary aim, is to establish, through the medium of humanity, an outpost of the consciousness of God in the solar system. This is a correspondence, macrocosmically understood, of the relationship existing between a master and his group of disciples. This, if pondered on, may serve as a clue to the significance of our planetary work. 2. To found upon Earth, as has already been indicated, a powerhouse of such potency and a focal point of such energy that humanity, as a whole, can be a factor in the solar system, bringing about changes and events of a unique nature in the planetary life and lives, and therefore in the system itself, and inducing an interstellar activity. 3. To develop a station of life through the medium of the 4th kingdom in nature, which will serve not only the planet and not only our particular solar system, but the 7 systems of which ours is one. This question of light, bound up as it is with the colors of the 7 rays, is as yet an embryo science, and it would be useless for us to enlarge upon it here. 4. To set up a magnetic center in the universe, in which the human kingdom and the kingdom of souls will, united or at one, be the point of most intense power, and which will serve the developed lives within the radius of the radiance of the one about whom naught may be said. unquote. Woohoo! The one about whom naught may be said. I love that. It sounds so Harry Potter, doesn't it? So who the hell is the one about whom naught may be said? Well, she, I'm going to go with she, is the life which is expressing itself/herself through the 7 solar systems, one of which is ours, making up our universe. And why the name, the one about whom naught may be said? Well, because the level of consciousness of an entity ensouling a universe is so vast and far beyond even the spiritual hierarchy as to be utterly unknowable to the likes of us. We're back to the pet rock thing again, but on steroids. Even so, we've got a pretty good description there of where we are headed as the next stage of our evolution and what our purpose is. And it's still pretty vast and tricky to get our heads around, even leaving aside the one about whom naught may be said. I mean, outpost of the consciousness of God, station of light, interstellar activity. You weren't planning on that when you got up this morning, were you? I know I wasn't. It all sounds very sci-fi. But let's just say, as we've been discussing throughout this 2-part series, it's all about that continuum of spirit and matter, about spirit being stepped down through matter and anchored on the earth. We're told that one day we will achieve what's known as the continuity of consciousness that the masters have, where we have full spiritual consciousness and perception alive in physical form. And that's what it's intended for us. And it's also what is meant by having heaven on earth. Well, my friend, that looks like a nice place to wrap this up. Heaven on earth. I could go on for ages about this stuff, as I find it so fascinating. And one of the great things, but also a bit of a drawback for me as I try to digest complex ideas like these, is that the ageless wisdom is so comprehensive and holographic in its information that I'm always coming up with zillions of things that relate to an idea and having to choose just a few of them that I'm trying to convey through my podcasts. So I hope you've enjoyed this rather esoteric episode today. I know that I was absolutely gaga, almost drunk with information when I first started getting into this amazing body of teachings that is the ageless wisdom. So I'm going to put links to all of the books and resources I mentioned in the show notes, which you can get at theinspirationcloud.com/SYO24. And if all of this stuff we've talked about today has kindled a fire within you to know more, then I encourage you to check out any of the books by Alice Bailey. And if you want to have a look at them without needing to buy them, these books are all available for you to read online free. You can go to lucistrust.org, and from there you can follow links to something like, I think it's just called Books Online, maybe it might say in the links. And you can access all of these amazing books and have a go. See if you actually want to invest in the paper copy, which I do recommend eventually. It's not always the best reading these things on a screen. And also, another one of the books I quoted from today is The Rosicrucian Cosmo Conception by Max Heindel. And I have also found that available online, free, as a PDF. Now, just a note about this book, whether you find the PDF or even buy a book. It's kind of in a strange format. It's, I think even the printed book is like photocopied pages of an old printing of this book. And the text it's kind of an odd font, and it's kind of thick and not very clear. And the same thing with the PDF. So anyhow, I don't want that to put you off reading it, because it is absolutely fascinating and illuminating subject matter. And it's going to tell you all you need to know about everything from atoms all the way up to solar systems and beyond. It's big stuff. Now, if you're ready to propel your own evolution forward, I suggest you download my quick start guide to doable meditation, as meditation is the main way that you can make that happen. So you can get that guide at theinspirationcloud.com/SYO101, and I'll put a link to the show notes. Seriously, meditation is the way to make greater contact with your soul and to evolve your consciousness. And also, if you're interested in learning more deeply about all of the fascinating topics and practices to take you further on your spiritual path, the kind of things we discuss in this podcast, and you want to amplify your well-being and your positive impact in the world, why don't you sign up to the waitlist for my upcoming Inner Circle membership? Go on over to theinspirationcloud.com/membership to get on the waitlist, and I'll keep you in the loop. Okay, my friend, that is all for today. I cannot thank you enough for choosing to spend your time with me. It really, I don't know, it just kind of blows my mind. It's really nice to connect with you this way. I hope you've enjoyed this 2-part exploration of life, the universe, and everything.
Disclaimer: the vast ideas contained herein have been digested through the tiny mind of Janine.
Okay, take care, my friend. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye. Thanks so much for listening and for sharing this podcast and for subscribing and leaving me a lovely 5-star review on iTunes. Those things really help to get the podcast out there so that it can serve more people. If you have any questions or would like me to address a certain topic, I'd love to hear from you. You can email me at info@theinspirationcloud.com. Thanks again, and I'll see you next week.